Africa guys, what's going on? I saw something that was very, very unusual in the scripture, and it caught my attention, and I've been working with it for the past couple days. I felt like I had to pass this on to you guys because it might develop on your side into a Bible conference if you take some time to research it, but this is going to be a huge challenge. Remember, we took a look at Ezekiel's temple, this reconstruction that's going to happen in the millennial age, where the Spirit of God now re-enters the building, and this is used as a worship site that causes men to understand Old Testament worship and how it points to the New Testament. And they will say of this place, the Lord is there. It's all going to come alive. It's all going to come together in Ezekiel's kingdom, in Ezekiel's millennial temple. And we saw that the Gentiles are now allowed to purchase property and own within Israel's allotment. That is huge. God now allowing the Gentiles to be part of his people and his civilization. We saw living waters, what comes out of this temple and how it causes the dry and the decadent to come to life. And this happens during the millennial reign of Christ, where it's going to be a living witness to reconnect man to God. Well, after thinking about this temple, I went back through the scripture and I tried to put together how many different sites were there constructed to bring man and God together. And it looks like there's 7. Well, go figure. 7's an interesting number, isn't it? That's the number of perfection and completion. So I made a list of the 7, and here they are. First is the Tabernacle of Moses, or the tent of meeting, as it's often called. This is where man and God would meet each other as a perfect worship service took place that would please God and satisfy the wrath of God. Well, man and God met together in that temple. Then there was the Tabernacle of David. You don't hear too much about the Tabernacle of David. That was built on the threshing floor of a guy named Araunah the Jebusite. David bought this to set up a worship site to turn the wrath of God. Well, David messed up. He called a census. Apparently God didn't want this, and David, it looks like, was going to put his confidence in numbers. God didn't want that, and the wrath of God came over the land. Well, David constructed this Tabernacle of David on the piece of property that he bought in a real hurry, in an emergency, and it turned the wrath of God. And this was a place where God met man, the Tabernacle of David. Now, David wanted to build this one here, the one that Solomon built. He wanted to build it right on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, where he had set up his tent. But God says, no, you're not my guy. You're going to have a son who's going to come from you. He'll be my guy, and he'll build the temple. So David did everything but the temple. He received from God the blueprints, if you would, on how it was to be constructed. He gathered together a great many of the materials to build it after making the materials list, and then he passed on the responsibility to his son, and his son Solomon built this temple right here. And this is the one that is up and running during most of the history that we have been discussing, from like 900 to, I guess about 586 before Christ. That's Solomon's temple. Now, this temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. After the exile, which is the time frame we're looking at right now, the temple is reconstructed. You know, guys like Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Malachi, these guys play a part in encouraging the reconstruction of the temple after the exile. Now, Herod came along in the New Testament, and he wanted to build this big thing for show. So as far as I know, the temple was moved from the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. It was moved farther up the hill. And this I'm calling, for the purposes of this, just Herod's reconstruction. This is the one where Jesus would deal with the religious elite. Now, that was destroyed by Rome in 70 AD. And there's nothing there now. However, it's going to be rebuilt during or just before the tribulation period. And then finally, Ezekiel's temple. But go figure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, what's interesting is that the Spirit of God leaves the building early in the book of Ezekiel. The presence of God left the place. God had shown Ezekiel that this place was so far beyond its ability to be used because men had defiled it so much. And as the Spirit of God left the building, I take that to mean that this temple, the reconstruction after the exile, Herod's reconstruction, this thing that's going to be built during the tribulation period that the Antichrist will defile, the Spirit of God does not return until Ezekiel's millennial kingdom. So I take that to mean the temple, this place where God and man are to meet, it doesn't work from the time of Solomon's temple up to the time of Ezekiel's millennial temple. The Spirit of God has left the building, and it is no longer used to bring people together. It's no longer used to bring man to God. Now, Jesus, the argument could be raised, Jesus did his work in Herod's temple. And you could say, well, God came into the building there. Yeah, he did. But you'll notice what Jesus met with there. He met with the religious elite, the hypocrites. And he said something pretty serious to that generation. He said, your house is being left to you desolate. So even this temple that Jesus came into, it appears to me that the Spirit of God had left during early in the ministry of Ezekiel. It had left the premises and was not going to return. Perhaps the Spirit of God would have returned had the people responded positively. That'll be a question we can ask God someday. But the Spirit of God does not return until Ezekiel's millennial kingdom, and then this is a living witness that one more time brings man to God. Now, one note. This temple here, the one that is going to be built, I call it the Tribulation Reconstruction. Now, make sure you stay out of that temple. This is the one that's going to be a counterfeit. It's the one where the Antichrist will come in, take his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. And we've been over this. The Antichrist will appear as a counterfeit Christ or an opposite Christ. He will present himself out of a false trinity. He will offer a false mark by which you can buy or sell. He will take to himself a false bride. As far as I can tell, this is the entity Babylon. And there was one other important thing. I just forgot it. Let's see, false resurrection, false trinity, false mark, false bride. Yeah, those are the counterfeits that he uses. And as far as I could tell, the tribulation temple is going to be nothing but a counterfeit. And the Spirit of God comes into the building one more time, back in the millennial kingdom. And this is after the Antichrist is destroyed. So why am I passing this on to you guys? Well, I think if you guys could go through the scripture, and this is going to be a huge challenge, but I think one or two of you are going to take it on. If you could go back into the history of each of these sites that were constructed supposedly to bring man and God together, and investigate what is the context under which each of these facilities were built, how they impacted the culture that were around them. How did God use this? I think the scripture will say something to you chronologically as you go through it, temple by temple, or tent by temple, if you would. I'm not sure. I've just been persuaded from studying this, from looking at Ezekiel's temple, looking backwards, that there's going to be some phenomenal treasure in here. Can you guys use this for a Bible conference? I don't know. I hope so. Anyway, I'm going to be back to the book of Daniel, probably maybe even tomorrow. So see you guys again soon. I just wanted to drop that in your ear because I'm pretty sure from what I think God is saying to me, there's going to be something here for you guys to check out. See you soon.